Fellow Culture Matters podcast. We're back again. Before I introduce the topic, here's a quote just for this episode. Knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it vanishes. Peter F. Drucker. Today's topic, what is the culture puzzle? On the topic of knowledge, hmm, improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it vanishes. How does knowledge give us a competitive advantage as a business in the marketplace? How does knowledge give us a competitive advantage in the marketplace? Well, you have to think, what's the value of information? What's the value of an idea? What's the value of an idea first versus an idea last versus somewhere in the middle? Right? This idea of product market fit, isn't that rooted in the phenomenon of actual human beings valuing a product or service, acting out their own agency in respect to how to that they're going to use a product or service, how they're going to use a product or service, how often they're going to use a product or service, how if they will share the fact or the reality that they use or a product or service, or and in turn may or may not share how they use and why they use it. There's an adage, if you're not first, you're last. But what if you're first and the knowledge you once had that led you to be first vanished? I think that's where Drucker's getting at. With knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it vanishes. And knowledge is a component, the how it's that it's had, that it's how it's used, how it's leveraged is a component of innovation, the recycling or redeeming process of an organization to continue to create and keep customers, to maintain its competitive advantage in the marketplace, which impacts customers, employees, shareholders, stakeholders, and so on. So, what is the culture puzzle? The culture puzzle is a process, it's a concept, it's an idea and an activity to attempt to create competitive advantage for those that participate in the culture puzzle. The culture puzzle is about discovery and exploration. The culture puzzle is about understanding, is about becoming aware, is about dissecting, getting underneath the hood, not even getting underneath just the hood, but inside of all of the parts. And not even just getting inside of the parts, if we're going to use a car metaphor, but tracking down where the parts have come from and discuss, doing due diligence around where they've come from to understand, their purpose and why they even exist in the first place and what's the purpose of those parts as it relates to the car, not just looking under the hood, but understanding all of the parts and where they come from and how they intersect and how they work together and why they exist and what has to happen for these parts to operate at the highest effectiveness and efficiency. And if I'm going to use a metaphor of a car, the culture puzzle is doing that with an organization. The culture puzzle, the culture puzzle is part I part concept, part sacrifice, because it takes time, money, and energy, part investment of both parties. And in this case, it would be myself performing the culture puzzle because step one is discovery. Step one is actually a decision that's made between myself at this juncture and my counterpart, which in turn, my counterpart, it, our counterpart is whomever is in the position of ultimate authority around the vision, around the strategy, around the people, the process, the product, the linchpin to the culture is the CEO. It's the manager of the business. It's the person that their role is multifaceted. It's to live in paradox and contradiction and somehow burden all of that while simultaneously being in multiple places at once, not only being in the present and burdening the potential catastrophe of the future, but to be in the future, to be in the vision, as well as to be in the past, to be aware and understood of where the organization has come from and why it exists in the first place and how to bring it forward. The culture puzzle is about discovery, it's about observation, it's about humility and fresh perspective so that an organization's knowledge can continually be improved, challenged, and increased co constantly so that it doesn't vanish, but that it flourishes. The culture puzzle it consists of story, it consists of language, it consists of symbolism and mediums or rituals, and the hero's journey of the operating principle of the organization, and that is the CEO. Step one is discovery. Step two, what does that mean? That means I am actually going to take time and space, right? Space as in physically being a part of the business. Time as in non-refuttable minutes, actual days, and even longer could be weeks, observing and dissecting and understanding and searching to figure out what are the actual problems that have arisen that will naturally arise in the organization. The discovery process is about intention, is about values, advisor to advisee. It's about participation, collaboration, and partnership. It's an actual investment of time between creator and recipient. The discovery process is where listening comes in. It's where curiosity comes in and exploration comes in. The discovery process is really honed and strengthened every single day in respect to the opportunity that I have to perform culture puzzles through every single podcast that exists that has been executed and will be executed on the Culture Matters podcast. Every time that an interview is performed, every time the due diligence process has been gone through, the preparation process, and the discovery of exploratory conversation, inquiry, and understanding has been performed by myself, I'm becoming more apt at being able to figure out things that may otherwise be invisible to others. Sharpening my blade, right? Abraham Lincoln said, if you have 7 hours to chop down a tree, it takes 6 hours to sharpen your blade. He also said, I don't like that man very much. I must get to know him. I'm paraphrasing. I don't like that man very much. I must get to know him. Something to that effect. So there's that idea that we could easily look at an organization that might not be operating at its highest and best and scoff and kind of pass it by and say there's nothing there. But what if the actual value was there? It's like a gold reserve and in a field, and no one's found the gold yet. They haven't started digging. The culture process is about not just looking past a bare, naked desert, but actually picking up a shovel, well, stopping one's car, getting out of the car, picking up a shovel and starting to dig with faith and perspective and a curiosity and intensity. The discovery process is a philosophical concept in the sense of professional services. What does it mean to be an advisor? What does it mean to consult? What does it mean to solve problems? What does it mean to collaborate? What does it mean to participate in the creation of value with the customer, the client partner, the organization, the management that's responsible for the organization, that's accountable to the results, that's accountable to the shareholders, that's accountable to the customers and what they truly think and feel about the organization's value proposition. Discovery may be a few days or a week, but discovery happens all year round as a consequence of the choice to read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, speak to let go. It's all interconnected. The Culture Matters podcast is a medium by which some of the necessary skills that are harnessed in the field, in actual work with actual businesses, are shaped and molded and curated and cultivated. That it's the sharpening of the axe to get for the inevitable opportunity that discovery will take place to figure out now one could listen and think, all right, well, that's a lot of words to say something very simple. Get a shadow and observe and figure out what the problems are. Plenty of people could do that have patience or have developed it, curiosity, knowledge that otherwise the client wouldn't have, experience and education, and so on. I just would like, and yes, plenty of great minds exist in the world and great hearts and willing individuals to discover, to advise, to observe, and to try to figure out, where the problems lie. However, I think all the extra words and explication makes is important because, you know, how many people or how many organizations actually will invest the extra effort on and off the field for the client's benefit, for the shareholders' benefit, for the stakeholders' benefit. I think there's a philosophical element to advisory, to consulting, to partnership, to value creation that isn't just textbook knowledge. It's not just, and even experience can undermine it because experience, if we've learned anything from listening to the Peterson monologues, especially rule number 4, Osiris stopped paying attention, the Pharaoh. Responsibility falls, uh, no, the opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Responsibility can naturally be abdicated as a consequence of experience. We've been there, we've done that, we have the knowledge, but quote, knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly or it vanishes. When the advisors, when those in professional services get lazy or arrogant, the quality of our service, of our products wanes. And there's no reality that where those in professional services are immune just because we might have studied more or experienced more or have innate capacities at a greater relative respect than the client or the client customers or the marketplace, statistically or whatever. The point is that all the extra words and all the extra sentiments, I'm still on step 1 of 5. Discovery is important because discovery is a philosophy, I think. It's a value system. It's a story. It's a meaning. And it's rooted in the purpose of professional services, which is to leave the client better off than they were before the engagement, right? The purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer, Peter Drucker. The purpose of professional services that leaves the client better than you found them. I'll give that to Weiss, doing work with the great Alan Weiss. So discovery is about observation and it's a revealing of the values. It's representing the sacrifice. It's representing the faith and in the outcome that it could actually take place. That not only could problems be unearthed that otherwise others cannot see, refuse to see, or can see, but are not being listened to within the organization, that someone outside has to actually come so that the organization, so that the fog, rule three, do not hide unwanted things in the fog. That naturally happens with organizations as they become more bureaucratic and political and decay and corrupt and so on and so forth. The purpose of the business is to create to create and serve is to serve. What did I just say? The purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. The purpose of professional services is to leave the client better than you found them. How do you actually do that? That's the question. How do you actually do that? And the culture puzzle is and process is a product and service to actually attempt to do that. Like the how to quote, knowledge has to be improved, how to improve knowledge, how to challenge knowledge and increase knowledge so that it doesn't vanish, but that it actually grows and blossoms. So discovery. Discernment is implicit in that because if think about this, so I could be a bit more literal here. The culture puzzle is an actual book that's going to be written. I'm going to write it. I'll speak in I because, well, not only am I the one doing them at this juncture, but just to make this conversation much less abstract and more simple, because there are others that can conform this. I don't want it to come across like I'm the only person that could do something of this nature when, just because the culture puzzle is something that we came up with to actually address concerns of the marketplace in small business. But um, discovery can take a few days or longer. Discovery is participation and partnership and sacrifice. It's paying attention. It's being a part of every meeting. It's listening and understanding and taking notes and analyzing. It's actually writing an actual book, The Culture Puzzle, which is a product, a book that will have information in it that then needs to be discerned. The discernment has to take place. Separate the wheat from the chaff. What is important? What isn't important? What isn't important? It's taking all this information and honing it in. If you have 100 units of energy, you're going to bring it down to about 7 units of energy. The discernment piece comes with intellect, education, insight, experience, wisdom, and once again, it has to do with the actual character and the relationship between advisor and advisee, firm and practitioner and client and recipient. But discernment is a big part of the culture puzzle process because just tons and tons of information isn't as valuable. Because then, it's like the argument about the value of chat GPT. Chat GPT can, we will get, when artificial intelligence and real intelligence meet, the power of both expands. So how we use, for example, ChatGPT will have a relationship with the value of it. It's aggregating all of this data and the relationship that we build with this extension of ourself, of our ability to reason and think, that can expand, not only expand our knowledge, increase the speed of our gathering of knowledge, but we still have to leverage judgment, discernment, reason to siphon what's important from what isn't, what makes sense from what doesn't. And that's an important, in a sense, and I'll use an analogy, the way ChatGPT can really level up an average person in speed and quality of their work I would argue that the culture puzzle process does the same for an organization. It's it's special in that way. So discovery, discernment, development, that's where actual time now. So let's say we spent a week together, the recipient has been observed and information has been gathered and now and distilled down to a workable clay. You got all these, yeah, you could pick out all your different ingredients, but you've got to ultimately figure out which one will be used and which ones won't, and the ones that will be used and how much amounts and in what order, so that the whether it's a statue that's being molded with clay and so on, or something that's being, carved out in stone, you've got to have the right tools and enough stone and the quality and yada, 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 but also making some type of meal. What are the ingredients? Which ones you're not going to use? Which ones you are going to use? In what amounts and in what order? And that's a development process, right? So I've talked about discovery process, time and space, the actual character it takes philosophically to partner with the recipient and an organization to. I haven't really talked about benefits at all. I'm just focusing on the what and the how and somewhat of the why, I guess, right? But not deeply enough of the benefits, but I have to get to that. But the development process is actually about doing the work, to writing and curating and creating the culture puzzle process. And for anyone that thinks, just, as of this recording, I've not yet used any type of artificial intelligence to ever write these books. There's a full books, and there's just finished the 10th culture puzzle in it's 2025, in about around 7 years, 10 culture puzzles, 10 recipients. All of the recipients have been on the Culture Matters podcast. You can listen to the podcast and you'd be able to, if you listen enough, figure out who has received them. Um, but 10 actual culture puzzles, 10 books in 7 years. I wasn't trying to, run a race or compete in a marathon on this. Plenty of other things have taken place as well, not just 30 Days of Thought, and many other books and deliverables and products, dozens and dozens and dozens, almost 100 really, have taken place in the last 7 years. But 10 full books unpublished, very specific to our client partners, have been gone through discovery and discernment and development and okay, delivering and so on. So we're talking about a lot of work. As of this recording, like I said, never used any type of, there wasn't even art of it, that on a public or accessible level. There wasn't even AI. And I'm excited to see how that integrates with all of this work, intensity, value, and I believe unique client um, client service. So discovery, discernment, development, that's actually writing the book. That's figuring out what is necessary from what is unnecessary, and not only what to say, but how to say it and where it fits and how that speaks to the recipient, so that ultimately the most powerful epiphanies and insights can be drawn from the experience of the delivery, which is part four. Someone actually, imagine you actually get a book that you can read. You're the recipient. So, you run a business and you're now receiving a book that's going to have as much truth as you can handle in it. Nietzsche said something to the effect of the the strength of a person's spirit is is rooted in how much truth that they can handle, right? How much they need muted, falsified, diluted. Well, the unvarnished truth is the goal, with data and arguments and analogy and metaphor necessary to level up the recipient and the organization. That can very well easily be performed and used with one's team and so on through the questions that are part of the culture puzzle, as well as the information that's given in definition form and in recap and analysis. The delivery portion is done with the advisor and the advisee, and that's going to actually take place with regularity, depending on how much time it makes sense to invest into the process, whether that's an hour every other week, 2 hours every week, or 30 minutes once a month. It will be dependent upon the actual specificity of what are the problems at hand, what is the vision at hand, what are the responsibilities at hand, who are we accountable to, and how much time do we have? Or is it going to be, um, a week straight of work in a hut on Mount Everest, being dramatic, obviously. Discovery, discernment, development, delivery. And I like to think the last one is destiny because over time, the vision will be curated based on information that is going to be articulated so that knowledge can be improved, challenged, and increased so that it doesn't vanish. Destiny means because a component of the culture puzzle is what is the architecture here? What do we actually believe and why? What's the purpose of our organization? What does that mean to us? What is the goal? Like, where are we going? What does that look like? What's the vision? How can we get there? If we were to define a mission, what's the utility in that? Who do we become actually looking in the past? Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forward. Who do we become when we look in the past and we can embrace the past and actually project into the future with a clear plan based on what we figured out that we didn't do right and what we did do well from the past? What could we actually develop in our products and our services? Who could we be as an organization? What would our culture look like in the future if we took the time to pay that close attention to the problems and the solutions? Well, we'd have a competitive advantage. We'd be thinking, we'd be able to we'd be less likely to succumb to the natural entropy, to the natural decay of the organization that once sprung forth something that the marketplace actually did value, that was seen. I want to keep bringing something else to light that two of the biggest destroyers of value for a company that's starting to succeed is business divorce and personal divorce, meaning the lives are tested. Small businesses, middle market, lower middle market, Main Street businesses, millions and millions of businesses in the US are going to die on the vine solely as a consequence of a lack of education, lack of self-awareness, lack of experience, lack of the information. You want to talk about knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly or advantages. How about the vanishes? I keep saying advantages or vanishes. How about the fact that small business founders are not tooled with the best knowledge, are not tooled with the best education, often, are not tooled with the best experiences, often, not always. There's exceptions. Yet these beautiful, unbelievable, intuitively genius ideas spring forth from know-nothings and nobodies. And I say that proudly because so many great people have come from nothing, no surname, and have been nobody. You've heard many on the Culture Matters podcast. If you listen to these interviews, these are everyday people that are not authors necessarily or famous pundits, but just everyday, hardworking, intentional, diligent, successful people, successful, well-rounded people, with idiosyncrasies attached. The culture puzzle process is about providing knowledge, is about challenging and critique, and is about increasing competitive advantage so that it not only sometimes so that it doesn't vanish, and sometimes so that it's more clear so that it can be taken advantage of in the first place. Like, it's one thing to help a company that's on the way up, on the way up, on the way up. It's another thing to help a company that might be going on the way down, but really has something special to offer. Imagine France didn't support the revolution. Imagine Ben Franklin wasn't savvy enough politically and socially to garner support when he was overseas. Maybe the American business, this startup of Western society that's given so many liberties and opportunities to reinvent the human animal culturally and economically and so on. Maybe it never exists. Yeah, it's imperfect like any business. It has many faults and that need to be improved and tinkered on constantly, right? We use a culture puzzle for the United States, maybe. But look what's to come of it. Look at the return on capital. Look at the return on investment. Look at the return of everything, of the underdog winning. Look at the return of the underdog winning the war. The culture puzzle is about that underdog. Yes, sure. Can, can the can the what's the opposite of the underdog? Is it just Goliath? I guess, but that kind of paints it as that evil Leviathan. That's a question of redemption. Could David have gotten some help and maybe took off his armor and just shook David's hand? I guess that's a different story, right? That's not really telling the story of the hero versus malevolence and the corruption of the state. But in a sense, the culture puzzle doesn't have to just help those that are David, that are the underdog, that may be overlooked. It could help Goliath too. The question becomes, if you're listening to this and you're interested in your knowledge being improved and increased constantly and not vanishing, the culture puzzle is something that if I say culture puzzle one more time, I'm driving myself nuts. Discovery, discernment, development, delivery, and destiny. It's about the future, right? Our belief, purpose, goal, vision, mission, our values. What are they and why are they? And how do we actually learn about ourselves as management, as operators of the business through the values that we are currently representing in our behavior, yet simultaneously articulating and thinking about that are important that might be in contradiction with our behavior. What are the rituals that make the organization successful? What are we doing now that's working? What are we not doing that could be implemented? And how do we move forward in the marketplace successfully together? Who out there is going to pay as much attention to the organization and really have skin in the game, time and energy and capital to actually help an organization innovate and develop, in the professional service sphere that isn't just trying to get something with the least amount of work possible. I guess that's implicit in this whole conversation is that the culture builds process it represents the belief in the recipient and the future possibility of culture matters and our client partner. And we have successfully delivered 9. I'm about to deliver the 10th in a couple weeks. And it's been an amazing experience. We've grown with the companies that we've worked with, even those that we are not currently. The relationships are strong, and there's much more to accomplish together. And even some of them, we've become partners. And unfortunately, some have passed away. And you know that if you listen to the show. The culture puzzle is the bedrock of Culture Matters as a firm, as a professional firm working with small businesses to help with company culture. And the culture puzzle process is exemplary of the values of Culture Matters. If you listen to the Culture Matters podcast, you might have heard some of the monologues on each of the values of Culture Matters from 30 Days of Thought. If you haven't, go listen to them. The culture puzzle is the consequence of an investment of well beyond 10,000 hours, as Robert Greene put it, reading and writing and working in businesses over the last decade of yours truly. And I challenge you to listen to this a couple times and think about your culture puzzle, what it would look like. Reach out to me, Jay Doran _ the culture man on Instagram if you want to learn more about the culture puzzle process. Please share this with a friend that cares about company culture, even one that doesn't. How about your enemies? Nietzsche said, we must be able to love our enemies and hate our friends. Share this with some of your enemies, some of your friends. Leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. Keep listening to the Culture Matters podcast. Our purpose is to uncover the genius of our guest with the goal to make your curiosity cool. And understand, all of this is not in vain and for naught. I'm pursuing my 50,000 interviews so that I can be the best advisor possible for our clients, our client partners. Culture matters. See you next time.